Have you ever wondered what men truly want but never say out loud? What they crave deep inside but keep hidden from the world? Most people think they have the answer, but the truth is far more complex than what society tells you. There is something men desire more than anything, something they will never openly admit. And if you understand it, you will hold a kind of power that few ever realize. Stay with me until the end of this video and you will discover the hidden truth that every man secretly longs for but will never tell you. Let's talk about what no one talks about. From the moment a boy grows up into a man, he is taught one thing: never show weakness, never admit fear, never express vulnerability. Society builds men to be strong, unshaken, and always in control. They are expected to be the providers, the leaders, the ones who hold everything together. And in this process, they learn to suppress their true emotions. Men are told that silence is power, that expressing their feelings makes them less of a man. So they bury their struggles, their desires, and their needs deep inside, hoping that someone, someday, will understand them without them having to say a word. But here's the truth: most people never do. What men truly crave is something simple, yet rare. They want to feel understood, not judged, not controlled, not fixed, just understood. They long for a space where they can exist without having to prove themselves every second, where they can drop the weight of expectations and just be who they are, without feeling like they have to live up to an image. Because here's what many don't realize: men are not as unshaken as they seem. They feel, they hurt, they struggle. The only difference is they don't always show it. But when a man finds someone who sees beyond his silence, who recognizes his unspoken struggles and respects his journey without trying to change him, it shifts everything. Because in a world where men are constantly told to man up, having someone who simply understands is rare. And rare things are valuable. Have you ever noticed how a man's entire energy shifts when he feels safe? When he's around someone who doesn't force him to talk, but makes him feel heard anyway. That's what he truly craves. Not words, but presence. Not forced conversations, but a connection that doesn't need to be explained. Most people think men want admiration, respect, or loyalty, and yes, those things matter. But underneath it all, they desire something deeper, the freedom to be themselves, without fear of judgment. This is the part no one talks about, the part they don't teach in books or movies, the part that only those who truly understand men will ever realize. A man will never come up to you and say, "I just want to be understood." He won't tell you, "I feel pressure every day to be strong and sometimes I just want to breathe." He won't admit that sometimes he's scared because he's not allowed to. But if you pay attention, if you look beyond the surface, you will see the weight he carries. And if you can understand that without him having to say it, without demanding explanations or forcing emotions, you will become unforgettable to him, because the world expects him to be unbreakable. But deep down, he's looking for a place where he doesn't have to be. And that, more than anything, is what men will never tell you, but they want badly. Stay with me, because in the next part, we dive even deeper into the unspoken desires of men, the things they will never say, but always feel. The things that separate those who understand men from those who only think they do. Let's continue. Men walk through life wearing a mask of strength, confidence, and control. They make it look effortless, handling responsibilities, leading, protecting, providing. From the outside, it seems like nothing can shake them. But what most don't realize is that behind that mask, there's a constant battle. A silent struggle they never show. Since childhood, men are taught that emotions are a weakness, that crying is unacceptable, that expressing fears makes them less of a man. So they learn to bury it all. Pain, frustration, insecurities, they hide it deep inside, hoping no one will ever notice. Because in their world, showing vulnerability is dangerous. It invites judgment. It makes them look weak. And weakness? That's something society never forgives. So they build walls, thick, unbreakable walls that protect them from the world's expectations. They laugh when they're hurting. They say, "I'm fine," when they're drowning inside. They pretend to have everything under control even when they feel lost. Because in a man's mind, admitting struggle is not an option. But here's what most people don't understand. Just because a man looks strong doesn't mean he doesn't feel pain. Just because he doesn't talk about his struggles doesn't mean he doesn't have them. He just learned that no one really listens. Think about it. When a man faces challenges, what does the world tell him? Man up. Be strong. Figure it out. No sympathy, no understanding. Just the expectation to keep moving, keep pushing, keep holding everything together. And so he does. Even when he's exhausted, even when he feels like breaking. Because in his mind, the moment he lets go, everything around him might fall apart. But what if for once he didn't have to wear the mask? What if for once he could just exist without the pressure of being the unshakable force for everyone else? This is what most men secretly desire but will never say out loud. They don't need someone to fix them. They don't need someone to pity them. They need someone who understands the weight they carry, someone who recognizes the effort they put in every day, someone who sees beyond the surface and realizes that even the strongest men have moments of doubt, moments of fear, moments of exhaustion. Respect is not just about admiring a man's strengths. It's about understanding his struggles, not forcing him to open up, but creating a space where he feels safe enough to do so. Because when a man finds someone who doesn't judge him for his silent battles, but instead respects the fact that he fights them every day, everything changes. A man will never tell you that he needs a moment to breathe. He won't say that he's tired of always being the one who has to be strong. He won't admit that sometimes he wishes he had someone to lean on, but if you pay attention, you'll see it in his eyes, in his silence, in the way he carries himself. The world only sees the mask. Very few ever see the man behind it. And those who do, they earn a place in his life that no one else ever will. Because in the end, strength is not the absence of pain, it's the ability to carry it without letting the world see. But every man, no matter how strong, wants at least one person who truly understands the weight he carries. Every man, whether he realizes it or not, puts people through a silent test. A test to see who truly understands him, who genuinely respects him, and who only sees him for what he provides. He won't announce it, he won't explain it, but he will watch, listen, and observe. Because men don't trust easily. Not with their struggles, not with their emotions, not with their deepest thoughts. From a young age, they've learned that opening up can be dangerous, that the wrong person will use their vulnerability against them. So they stay guarded, careful, selective. A man may have many people around him, but he only lets a few truly get close. And even fewer get to see the version of him that exists behind closed doors, the version that is tired, unfiltered, and real. But before he lets anyone into that space, he needs to know one thing. Can he trust you with his silence? Most people assume that earning a man's trust is about proving loyalty through words, compliments, promises, grand gestures. But men don't trust words. They trust consistency. They trust energy. They trust actions over time. They watch how you respond when they don't have the answers. They notice whether you respect their moments of quiet or try to force them to speak. They see how you react when they're struggling, whether you offer support or just look for explanation. And most importantly, they test whether you can handle their moments of weakness without losing respect for them. This is the unspoken fear most men carry, that the moment they drop the act, the moment they show their fears, their insecurities, their struggles, the people who once admired them will start seeing them as less. This is why men don't always open up, even when they want to. They are not afraid of emotion. They are afraid of how those emotions will change the way people see them. Because the world celebrates a man's strength, but it rarely honors his struggles. It loves the man who stands tall, but turns away from the man who stumbles. So when a man lets his guard down, when he shares a small piece of his real self, it is never by accident. It is a test. A test to see if you will still respect him when he's not at his best, if you will still see him as capable when he's struggling, if you will stand by him when he doesn't have the answers. Most people fail this test without even realizing it. They push too hard. They demand explanations. They assume that silence means something is wrong. But the truth is, men don't always want to be understood through words. They want to be understood through presence. through patience, through the quiet kind of support that doesn't need to be spoken, the person who passes this test, the one who sees the man behind the mask and doesn't flinch. That's the person who earns his trust in a way that no one else ever will. A man can care deeply about someone and still pull away. He can love, respect, and appreciate someone and yet create distance. To most, this seems confusing. Why would a man step back from something good? Why would he choose to be alone when he clearly values the connection? The answer is simple. Men retreat when they feel emotionally unsafe. This doesn't mean physical safety. It means emotional security. The ability to be himself without being misunderstood, judged, or pressured to express emotions in a way that doesn't feel natural to him. Men are problem solvers by nature. When they face challenges, their instinct is to withdraw and figure things out alone. It's not because they don't care. It's not because they don't trust the people around them. It's because from a young age, they've been wired to believe that their struggles are their own to bear. Unlike women, who often seek connection during emotional stress, men do the opposite. They step back. They go silent. They retreat into their own minds to sort through their emotions before they can bring them back to the surface. But here's where things go wrong. When a man pulls away, most people assume the worst. They take it personally. They believe he's lost interest or that something is wrong with the relationship. And instead of giving him space, they chase. They push for answers. They demand to know what's wrong. And that makes him pull away even further. Because for a man, pressure does not bring him closer. It makes him shut down. Men need space to process. They need room to think. When they're overwhelmed, the last thing they want is to explain themselves in the moment. What they need is patience, understanding, the kind of energy that says, I trust you to come back when you're ready. When a man sees that he can step back without being guilted, questioned, or judged, something changes. He realizes that he has found something rare, a connection that doesn't suffocate him, but instead allows him to breathe. This is why the strongest relationships, whether in love, friendships, or family, are the ones built on trust in the distance. Not just trust when things are easy, but trust when he pulls away. He will leave. Distance is not a sign of disinterest, it's often a sign of deep processing. A man who cares will return, but only if he feels that his space is respected, that he is not being forced to explain things he isn't ready to say. Most people push men into emotional isolation without realizing it. They misinterpret his silence as neglect. They try to pull him out of his thoughts before he's ready. They assume that if he truly cared, he would express it on their timeline. But men do not express care the same way. Their love is often quiet. Their loyalty is often shown in actions, not words. Their way of handling emotions is different. Not wrong, just different. And the moment someone understands this, that a man's silence is not rejection, but a need for mental clarity, that is the moment they become irreplaceable. Because very few ever take the time to truly understand how men process emotions. A man does not need someone who will chase him when he pulls away. He needs someone who trusts him enough to let him come back on his own. Men are taught to be strong, independent, and unshaken by emotions. Society celebrates their ability to endure, to push through pain without complaint. But beneath that strength, beneath the silence, there is something they deeply crave, a kind of support that most people never offer. It's not about fixing their problems. It's not about offering solutions. It's not about telling them what they should do. Men don't want to be saved. They don't need to be reminded of their responsibilities or pressured to talk when they're not ready. What they need is presence, the kind of presence that doesn't demand anything, the kind that allows them to exist without expectation, a space where they don't have to perform, where they don't have to pretend, where they don't have to be anything other than themselves. For most men, the world feels like a battlefield. They're constantly proving, constantly providing, constantly solving. Every day is a fight. To be respected, to be valued, to be seen as capable. And the truth is, they don't mind carrying that weight. They take pride in it. But even the strongest man has moments where he just wants to put the weight down, where he wants to sit in silence without being questioned, where he wants to be in the presence of someone who understands that he doesn't need words to feel supported. This is what most people get wrong. They assume that support means talking, asking, analyzing. They believe that to help a man, they must get him to open up. But men don't operate that way. For them, the deepest kind of support is the absence of pressure. A man feels safe when he knows he can sit in the same room with you, say nothing, and still feel understood. When he knows he can struggle without being made to explain himself. When he knows that his silence is not seen as a problem, but as part of how he processes life. And the rare people who understand this, the ones who offer this kind of support, become the people a man trusts the most. Because men don't need someone who will constantly ask what's wrong. They need someone who will sit beside them when everything feels heavy and simply say, "I'm here." No pressure, no judgment, no need for explanations. The truth is, men don't expect to be understood by everyone. They know that most people will never take the time to see past the mask. But when they find someone who does, someone who knows how to support them in a way that feels natural to them, that's when they let their guard down. Because real support isn't about fixing. It's about allowing a man to be himself without fear of being misunderstood. And when a man feels that kind of support, he doesn't forget it. Men don't stay because of beauty. They don't stay because of charm, status, or convenience. Those things may capture their attention, but they don't hold their soul. What makes a man stay, what makes him commit with his heart, his mind, and his soul is peace. The world demands so much from men. Every day they step out into a battlefield where they're expected to perform, provide, and prove themselves over and over again. The pressure never stops. The expectations never ease. The moment they relax, they feel like they're falling behind. So when a man finds a space that gives him relief instead of more pressure, he holds on to it with everything he has. Men don't speak about it often, but their deepest desire is to have a place where they don't have to wear armor, a place where they can be themselves, without judgment, without expectation, without the weight of the world pressing down on them. Most people believe that to keep a man interested, they have to be exciting, unpredictable, or constantly bringing something new to the table. But a man doesn't stay where he feels entertained, he stays where he feels safe. Because safety is rare. Peace is rare. A space that allows him to exist without pressure, without performance. That is something he will never take for granted. A man may be drawn to looks, but he stays for the energy. He stays for the way he feels when he's around someone. If every conversation feels like a test, if every moment feels like a demand, if he constantly feels like he has to explain himself, he will begin to drift. Not because he doesn't care, but because his soul craves rest. And here's the secret most people don't realize. Men don't run from love. They run from stress. Love should not feel like another battle to fight. It should not feel like another responsibility to carry. A man who already carries the weight of the world does not want to come home to more weight. He wants to come home to peace. That doesn't mean ignoring problems. That doesn't mean avoiding conversations. It means understanding that peace is not the absence of challenges, it's the presence of emotional security. A man will stay where he feels like his soul is understood, where he doesn't have to constantly explain his thoughts, where he can sit in silence and still feel connected, where his struggles are not used against him, but instead met with patience and understanding. Most men won't tell you this, but when they find that kind of peace, they never want to leave. Because in a world that constantly demands so much from them, finding someone who allows them to just be, that is the rarest gift of all. There is a battle every man fights, but few will ever speak about it. It's not the battle of work, money, or responsibilities. Those are things they're used to handling. The real battle is internal, a war between who they are and who they are expected to be. From a young age, men are taught to suppress their emotions, to be strong, to never show weakness. If they feel fear, they must hide it. If they feel fear, they must hide it. If they feel lost, they must figure it out alone. And so they carry everything in silence. the weight of expectations, the pressure to provide, the fear of failure, the need to be enough. They wake up every day knowing that no matter what happens, they cannot afford to fall apart, because the world doesn't stop for them. Society doesn't make space for their struggles. If they break, no one is coming to save them. And this is the part most people don't understand. Men don't stay silent because they don't want to talk. They stay silent because for most of their lives, no one has ever truly listened. If a man expresses doubt, he's told to man up. If he admits to struggling, he's seen as weak. If he talks about his emotions, people get uncomfortable. So after a while, he stops trying. He learns to keep it all inside. But here's what most people don't see. Even the strongest men have moments of exhaustion, moments where they just want to put the weight down, where they wish, just for a second, that someone could understand without needing them to explain. What a man truly desires is not for someone to solve his problems. He doesn't expect the world to change. What he craves is a space where he doesn't have to pretend. A space where he can be honest about his fears without being judged. A space where he can rest without being seen as lazy. A space where he can fail without feeling like he's losing his worth. Because men are not afraid of responsibility. They are not afraid of pressure. What they fear is never being enough, no matter how much they give. And when a man feels like no matter what he does, it will never be enough, that's when he begins to withdraw. Not because he doesn't care, but because his energy is gone. His soul is tired. His heart has been carrying too much for too long. Most men won't ask for help. Not because they don't need it, but because they don't believe it's an option. They've spent years convincing themselves that their struggles don't matter, that their pain is just part of life. But even the strongest man, even the one who seems like he has everything under control, has moments where he wishes someone would simply say, "I see you." No expectations, no judgment, just recognition, just understanding, just the permission to be human. Because in a world that constantly demands more from them, the greatest gift a man can receive is simply the space to be himself. Have you ever wondered why men go silent, why they pull away when they're hurting, why they shut down instead of expressing what's on their minds? It's not because they don't feel. It's not because they don't care. It's because for most of their lives, they've been taught that their pain is a burden. A man is expected to be strong, to take care of others, to handle his problems alone. From childhood, he learns that crying is a sign of weakness, that complaining makes him less of a man, that talking about his struggles only invites judgment, not understanding. So he learns to suffer in silence. If a man is dealing with stress, he won't always say it. He'll just become distant. If he's overwhelmed, he won't always ask for help. He'll just retreat into his own world. And when he does, people assume he's uninterested, cold, or emotionally unavailable. But the truth is far deeper than that. He's not ignoring the world. He's carrying too much. Every man reaches a point where the weight becomes unbearable. But instead of reaching out, he withdraws. Because experience has taught him that his pain is his responsibility alone. And this is what most people don't see. Silence is not a sign of not caring. In fact, most of the time it's the opposite. A man goes quiet when he's overwhelmed, not because he's indifferent, but because he's fighting battles no one knows about. A battle between who he is and who he's expected to be. A battle between expressing himself and being misunderstood. A battle between needing help and believing he doesn't deserve it. This is why so many men suffer in the shadows, because they don't want to be a burden, because they believe no one will understand, because they think opening up will only lead to more problems. And so they continue their days as if everything is fine. They smile when they need to, they joke when expected, they perform their duties without hesitation. And yet, inside, they are exhausted. But here's the thing. A man's silence is not an invitation to ignore him. It's a sign that he needs understanding more than ever. What a man truly desires is not constant questioning or pressure to open up. He doesn't need to be pushed or forced into conversation. What he needs is the space to feel safe enough to speak. Because when a man feels safe, when he knows that his words won't be used against him, when he knows he won't be seen as weak for struggling, That's when he opens up. That's when he lets his guard down. That's when he shares the things he's been holding inside for so long. Most men won't say it out loud, but what they truly crave is a connection where they don't have to pretend, where their silence is met with patience instead of frustration, where their struggles are met with understanding instead of judgment, where their pain is seen even when they don't speak. Because at the end of the day, men don't want to be rescued. They don't want pity. They don't need someone to fix their problems. They just want to be understood. A man can go his entire life without saying what he truly needs. Not because he doesn't feel it, but because he believes no one will understand. He's been conditioned to suppress, to endure, to figure things out on his own. But deep down, beneath the silence, beneath the strength, there are unspoken desires. Things he won't ask for, but deeply craves. One of the biggest things a man wants is respect, not just in words, but in action. He wants to feel valued, like his efforts matter, like what he does is seen and appreciated. The world often measures a man by his achievements, his status, or his ability to provide. But beyond all of that, what truly fuels him is knowing that his presence holds meaning, that his hard work is not just expected, but acknowledged. Respect is not about submission or control. It's about recognizing his efforts. It's about understanding the weight he carries. A man will move mountains for someone who genuinely appreciates what he does. But the moment he feels dismissed or taken for granted, something inside him starts to shut down. Another thing men deeply desire but rarely speak about is peace. A place where they can let their guard down. A space where they don't have to be in fight mode all the time. The world demands so much from a man. Pressure from work, responsibilities at home, expectations from society. Everywhere he turns, there's something to handle, something to fix, something to prove. So what does he want more than anything? A space where he doesn't have to fight, where he doesn't have to defend himself, where he doesn't have to explain why he's tired, why he's quiet, or why he just wants a moment to breathe. Peace is not about avoiding challenges. A strong man will always rise to the occasion. He's built to handle difficulties. But what drains him is constant conflict, unnecessary drama, and the feeling that no matter what he does, it's never enough. When a man finds a space where he feels at ease, where he's not constantly on edge, he will cherish it like nothing else. And then there's loyalty, not just in words, but in actions. A man can face the world's toughest battles, but what truly keeps him going is knowing that the people closest to him have his back. Loyalty is about consistency. It's about standing by his side when things aren't perfect. It's about being there, not just when everything is going well, but when life is messy, difficult, and uncertain. A man will never beg for loyalty. He won't demand it, but he will notice when it's missing. He will see who stands with him when things get tough, and if he ever feels like he's standing alone, he won't complain. He'll just start pulling away. Lastly, a man craves trust, the ability to be himself without judgment, the freedom to express his thoughts without being criticized, the knowledge that his word is enough. In a world that constantly questions his intentions, his decisions, and his worth, trust is rare, but when he finds it, he will give everything he has to protect it. Men are not complicated. They don't need grand gestures. They don't need constant validation. What they need is understanding, to be seen, to be valued, to be given the space to breathe. Because at the end of the day, the strongest man in the world still wants what every human being wants. To be loved, to be respected, and to know that he is not alone. Every man you meet is fighting a battle you cannot see. He may not talk about it, he may not show it, but it's there, hidden beneath the surface, masked behind a smile, buried under his responsibilities. Society has conditioned men to suppress their struggle, to keep moving forward no matter how exhausted they feel, to be the provider, the protector, the problem solver. No one asks if he's okay. No one wonders if he needs a break, because the world assumes that men are built to endure. But even the strongest men have limits. He wakes up every morning with a weight on his shoulders, a pressure to perform, to succeed, to meet expectations. He carries the burden of his past, the uncertainty of his future, and the silent fears he cannot. He worries about money, about stability, about whether he's doing enough, achieving enough, being enough, and yet he keeps going. Not because it's easy, but because he feels he has no choice. Because he knows that if he stops, everything around him might fall apart. But here's what no one tells you. Just because a man doesn't complain doesn't mean he isn't struggling. Just because he doesn't break down in front of you doesn't mean he's okay. Just because he carries it well doesn't mean the load isn't heavy. Men are expected to be providers, but they also need provision. They give strength to others, but they also need a place to regain their own strength. They protect the people they love, but they also need to feel protected, not physically, but emotionally. He won't always say it, but sometimes he just wants to be heard, not fixed, not judged, just heard. Sometimes he just wants a moment where he doesn't have to be strong, where he doesn't have to pretend that everything is under control, where he can just exist without pressure, without expectations, without the weight of the world on his back. But instead of asking for these things, he stays silent because he's been conditioned to believe that vulnerability is weakness, that needing support makes him less of a man. So he suppresses, he buries his struggles deep inside, convincing himself that no one would understand, that no one really cares. And the more he suppresses, the more he disconnects from himself, from the people around him, from the life he's trying so hard to build. This is why so many men suffer in silence. This is why so many break down when no one is watching. Because they've spent years pretending they're fine, only to realize that pretending doesn't make the pain go away. If there's one thing every man needs, it's understanding. Not pressure, not criticism, just the freedom to be human, to feel without shame, to struggle without guilt, to express without fear of being seen as weak. Because the truth is, strength isn't about suppressing pain, it's about facing it. It's about knowing when to stand tall and when to allow yourself to lean on someone. Every man, no matter how strong, needs a space where he doesn't have to carry everything alone, where he doesn't have to hide his struggles, where he doesn't have to pretend. And when he finds that space, he will not only thrive, he will become unstoppable. A man will never tell you outright when he feels misunderstood. He won't argue. He won't explain himself over and over again. He won't try to convince anyone of what he truly means. Instead, he will pull away, slowly, silently, without warning. He's not doing it to punish anyone. He's not playing games. He's not seeking attention. He's simply protecting himself from something he has experienced too many times before. The feeling of being unheard, unappreciated, or misinterpreted. Men operate in a world that expects them to be logical, composed, and unemotional. They are not taught to express their deepest thoughts in ways that everyone can easily understand. So when they do open up, even in small ways, they are testing the waters. They are seeing whether it is safe to share, whether their words will be received with understanding or dismissed as irrelevant. And when they are met with criticism instead of comprehension, when their emotions are downplayed or their words twisted, they learn a painful lesson. It's better to stay silent. This is why a man will shut down instead of argue. This is why he will withdraw instead of fight to be heard. He is not avoiding confrontation, he is avoiding disappointment. Because in his mind, why say anything if it's only going to be misunderstood? Men pull away not because they don't care, but because they feel that no matter what they say or do, it won't be enough. And once a man reaches this point, it's hard to bring him back. He craves understanding, but he won't beg for it. He desires connection, but he won't chase it. If he feels like his presence isn't valued, he will remove it. If he feels like his words don't matter, he will stop speaking. If he feels like he's only needed for what he can provide, he will stop giving. This is how men protect themselves from situations that drain them, from relationships that make them feel invisible, from conversations that lead nowhere. But here's the truth most people don't realize. When a man pulls away, it's not because he wants to leave. It's because he wants to be pulled back. He wants to feel like someone actually cares, to understand him, like someone is willing to listen, not to react, not to argue, but to truly hear what he's trying to say. He doesn't need grand gestures. He doesn't need constant praise. What he needs is recognition. Recognition of his struggles, his efforts, his emotions, even the ones he rarely expresses. When a man feels understood, when he feels like he doesn't have to explain himself 100 times just to be heard, when he feels like his words carry weight, he will stay. He will open up, he will give more, love more, invest more. But when he feels unseen, unheard, and unappreciated, he will slowly disappear. Not in anger, not in resentment, but in quiet acceptance that his presence is not truly needed. A man's silence is never empty. It's full of everything he's too tired to say. There's something every man craves, something he longs for in silence, but rarely expresses out loud. It's not money, it's not status, it's not even success, it's peace. The kind of peace that allows him to breathe without the weight of expectation crushing his chest. The kind of peace that makes him feel safe, not just physically, but emotionally. The kind of peace that makes him feel like he belongs, not because of what he provides, but because of who he is. Men live in a world that constantly demands more from them. They are expected to be strong, to be providers, to be the pillar that never crumbles. But no one asks what happens when that pillar starts to crack. No one considers how exhausting it is to always be the one holding everything together. And so he searches for peace in different ways. Some find it in silence, escaping into their own thoughts where no one can judge them. Some drown themselves in work, in distractions, in anything that keeps their mind from facing the chaos within. But what a man truly desires is a space where he can exist without pressure. A space where he doesn't have to prove himself, where he doesn't have to perform, where he doesn't have to be anything other than himself. He wants to be around people who don't constantly question his intentions, who don't assume the worst of him, who don't make him feel like he has to explain every emotion he experiences. He doesn't want arguments that feel like battles. He doesn't want relationships that feel like obligations. He doesn't want to constantly defend himself for feeling the way he does. He simply wants peace. A man will walk away from anything that disrupts that peace. It doesn't matter how much history is there. It doesn't matter how much effort he has put in. If something constantly drains him, if something makes him feel like he is always on edge, he will slowly start to detach. Because for him, peace is not a luxury, it's a necessity. When a man finds peace, he becomes unstoppable. He thrives, he builds, he protects, he gives more, because he is no longer spending all his energy trying to survive. He is no longer exhausted from battles that don't need to be fought. He is no longer carrying the weight of unnecessary stress. But when a man lacks peace, everything suffers. His mindset, his relationships, his ambition, his ability to love fully and freely. This is why men crave peace more than anything. It's not about avoiding responsibility. It's not about running from challenges. It's about having a foundation strong enough to support everything they're trying to build. And when a man finds that peace, he will never take it for granted. He will protect it at all costs. He will walk away from anything that threatens it. Because at the end of the day, peace is not just something he wants. It's something he needs. Once a man realizes the value of peace, something inside him changes. He no longer tolerates what he once ignored. He no longer entertains what once drained him. He no longer fights battles that don't deserve his energy. Because when a man has spent years in chaos, when he has lived in an environment where he always had to prove himself, where he had to suppress his emotions, where he had to constantly explain his actions, he reaches a breaking point. And at that moment he makes a decision. His peace will no longer be negotiable. This is why men walk away without explanation, not because they don't care, but because they care too much about protecting their energy. They have learned that peace is fragile, that the wrong people can destroy it in an instant, that the wrong environment can turn them into someone they no longer recognize. And that's the moment when a man starts to set boundaries. Boundaries are not walls. They're doors with locks. And a man who values his peace will no longer give everyone access. He will no longer allow negativity to seep into his mind. He will no longer allow manipulation, mind games, or toxic behavior to dictate his emotions. He chooses silence over arguments because he knows that not every battle deserves his energy. He chooses distance over disrespect because he knows that some people thrive on conflict and he refuses to give them the reaction they crave. He chooses clarity over confusion because if someone constantly makes him question their intentions, they are not meant to be in his life. This is why men leave even when they love deeply. They leave because they are exhausted. They leave because they are tired of proving themselves. They leave because they've realized that love should never come at the cost of their inner peace. A man doesn't need someone who adds stress to his life. He needs someone who understands that peace is sacred. He needs someone who doesn't create problems just to feel entertained. Someone who doesn't bring unnecessary drama into his world. Someone who knows that respect is not something to be tested. It's something to be given freely. And when a man finds that, he holds on to it. He values it more than words can express. Because a peaceful man is a powerful man. His mind is clear, his focus is sharp, his energy is directed toward things that truly matter. He is not distracted by petty conflicts. He is not drained by pointless arguments. He is not stuck in situations that bring him nothing but frustration. And that's what makes him different. That's what makes him unshakable. He no longer reacts emotionally to situations that used to trigger him. He no longer feels the need to prove himself to people who will never appreciate him. He no longer wastes time on anything that does not align with his purpose. He understands that the most valuable thing he can ever have is a mind free from chaos. And for that, he will walk away from anything and anyone who disturbs it. Because at the end of the day, a man who has peace has everything, and a man who lacks it has nothing. A man who values himself will always choose growth over comfort. He understands that comfort is an illusion. It feels good in the moment, but it leads nowhere. It keeps him stuck in places he has outgrown, surrounded by people who do not challenge him, living a life that feels safe but unfulfilled. And that's why he refuses to settle. Because the moment a man stops growing, he starts dying. His dreams begin to fade. His ambition weakens. His energy disappears. He no longer moves with purpose, and before he realizes it, he has become a shadow of the man he was meant to be. This is why men walk away from situations that no longer serve them. It's not because they are heartless. It's not because they don't care. It's because they know their potential is bigger than their past. And if something is holding them back, whether it's a toxic relationship, a draining environment, or an unfulfilling job, they make the difficult decision to leave. Because a man who is serious about his life knows one thing: growth requires sacrifice. He has to let go of people who bring negativity. He has to walk away from distractions that slow him down. He has to say no to things that don't align with his vision. And sometimes that means choosing loneliness over comfort. That means standing alone instead of blending in. That means disappointing people who expected him to stay the same. But a man who understands his purpose is not afraid of being alone, because he knows that solitude is where transformation happens. It's in those quiet moments when no one is watching that he builds himself, that he sharpens his mind, that he strengthens his discipline, that he prepares for the life he was meant to live. A weak man fears discomfort. He avoids struggle. He chooses the easy path, even when he knows it leads nowhere. But a strong man, he embraces it. He knows that every challenge he faces is shaping him into something greater. Every setback is preparing him for his next level. Every hardship is building the kind of resilience that cannot be broken. That's why you'll notice something about men who are focused. They don't engage in unnecessary drama. They don't waste time trying to convince people to understand them. They don't let emotions control their decisions. Instead, they move with logic, with purpose, with a mindset that refuses to be distracted by anything that doesn't contribute to their growth. And when a man starts to think like this, his entire world changes. He no longer seeks approval from others because he understands that most people won't understand his vision until they see the results. He no longer complains about the difficulties he faces because he knows that pressure is what turns coal into diamonds. He no longer allows temporary emotions to make permanent decisions because he knows that discipline will always take him further than feelings ever could. This is why men disappear when they're working on themselves. It's not because they are running away. It's because they are building something that cannot be interrupted. They are fighting battles that no one sees. They are pushing themselves in ways that most people cannot understand, and they know that when they come back, they will not be the same. A man who is committed to growth does not fear change. He embraces it. He welcomes discomfort because he knows it's a sign of progress. He welcomes failure because he knows it's a lesson in disguise. He welcomes the unknown because he trusts himself to handle whatever comes next. Because in the end, a man who chooses growth will always outlast the man who chooses comfort. One will evolve while the other stays the same. One will rise while the other remains stuck. One will build the life he always dreamed of, while the other will look back and wonder what could have been. And that's the difference between a man who lives with purpose and a man who simply exists. A man who knows his worth is never afraid to walk away. He understands that walking away is not weakness, it's strength. It takes discipline to leave behind what no longer serves him. It takes wisdom to recognize when something is holding him back, and it takes courage to move forward without looking back. Walking away is not about giving up. It's about knowing when to stop wasting time. It's about understanding that not every battle is worth fighting. Not every situation deserves his energy, and not every person deserves access to his life. Weak men stay in places where they are not valued. They keep fighting for people who don't respect them. They tolerate disrespect, thinking that one day things will change. They keep investing in situations that drain them, hoping for a different outcome. But strong men, they don't beg for what should be freely given. They don't chase validation. They don't force themselves to fit into places where they are not wanted, because they understand one truth: walking away is a statement of self-respect. A man who values himself does not settle for half love, half effort, or half respect. He does not entertain people who play games with his emotions. He does not beg for appreciation or recognition. He knows that the right people will respect him without being asked. And if they don't, he walks away without hesitation. Walking away is a skill that every man must master. It is the ability to detach emotionally from what no longer aligns with his growth. It is the power to say, "This is not for me," without guilt. It is the mindset that values peace over chaos, purpose over distractions, and self-worth over temporary attachments. But make no mistake, walking away is not easy. It will test a man's patience. It will challenge his emotions. It will force him to trust the unknown. Because letting go of something familiar, even when it's toxic, is never simple. The mind will resist change. The heart will crave comfort. The ego will whisper doubts. But a man who is serious about his future does not let temporary emotions dictate his destiny. He does not let loneliness make him settle. He does not let fear keep him stuck. He understands that growth requires loss, that sometimes the only way to move forward is to leave behind what is weighing him down, and that's the hardest part: letting go. Letting go of people who no longer serve a purpose in his life. Letting go of relationships that no longer bring him peace. Letting go of environments that no longer challenge him to grow. Because every time a man walks away from something that is beneath him, he steps closer to something greater. Walking away teaches discipline. It strengthens the mind. It builds a level of self-respect that cannot be broken. A man who has mastered the power of walking away is a man who cannot be manipulated. He does not entertain drama. He does not engage in unnecessary arguments. He does not waste energy on things that drain him. And because of this, his presence becomes powerful, his energy becomes rare, his value increases. Because people begin to realize that he is not like the rest. He does not stay where he is not valued. He does not chase what is not meant for him. And he does not tolerate what does not align with his standards. This is what makes a man unstoppable. He is not controlled by emotions. He is not trapped by fear. He is not weakened by attachments. He moves forward even when it's difficult. He chooses self-respect over temporary comfort. And he never ever begs for what should be naturally his. Because at the end of the day, a man who knows his worth does not seek approval. He does not seek validation. He does not seek permission. He simply walks away, knowing that what is truly meant for him will always meet him on the path of self-respect, self-discipline, and self-mastery.